I write. It's kind of what I do. I can't seem to stop, even though I know better sometimes. And I can't stop from telling the truth. It's something that I truly believe in with all of my soul. I make mistakes, but I will never lie to you. I will never tell you a lie. I may tell you something and it may not be true because I was misinformed or the data that I used to make the determination was wrong. But I will never intentionally lie to you. That is something that I've worked on since I became a man. It's something that I take my greatest pride as a man in. The Oroville Dam. What a magnificent structure, a beautiful structure, a magnificent asset to your state, a magnificent asset to your community. A huge watershed with many, many multiple reaches, a snowpack in the mountains. Every drop of water that falls within that white line must cross across that weir eventually, one way or another. There are only 3 ways of moving water through that endeavor. One of those is through the hydroelectric plant. There was once a bottom drain, but it broke. It was never fixed. The hydro plant is operational, but it seems always to be some elements of it that are in disrepair or inoperable. For instance, one of the drains in one of the 2 very small lines, which could move a significant amount of water out of the dam, but which don't operate properly. So we can move water out through the hydroelectric plant, as you all know, through the principal spillway and through the emergency spillway. I won't oversimplify this because that's not why you guys have me here. You all know a whole lot about this dam, probably in some ways a lot more than I do. The parts of any dam include a principal spillway. Now this principal spillway is in the pool there. You see an intake structure in the center. Water runs down through it like a bathtub drain and runs out. That's very appropriate. It also has an emergency spillway, which you see to the right-hand side of that slide. And that is how water is exhausted from the pool when the elevation gets up above the elevation of the weir, which is the controlling element of the structure of that spillway. The pathway that the water runs down is called the sluiceway. It's another name for it. Here is Oroville Dam, your dam. Many, many times, one of the frustrations about writing about Oroville Dam is that as soon as you write something, instantly, men write comments to it, men, women, children, that say things like, well, that's just this emergency spillway. The dam's fine. It's the emergency spillway that you're talking about. And of course, the emergency spillway is founded on bedrock, so it can't possibly erode away. I try not to spend a lot of time arguing with these people, but so everyone understands, the emergency spillway, the principal spillway, the bottom drain, the embankment, these are all parts of a dam. There's no doubt about that. I promise you that. The dam has parts, and these are what we call those parts. And even if the emergency spillway is in another county, it is a part of that dam. If it fails and it lets water out, I promise you, it's a part of that dam. A number of things happened, and I won't spend a lot of time on this either because you know this better than anyone. They opened up the spillway with some velocity, not a great velocity. The spillway failed about halfway down in an area that was backfilled with earth beneath the spillway about 5 feet deep on average. Not the first time it's failed there. It had failed there before. they thought, well, this isn't good, and indeed it is not, especially in a situation where you have no proper bottom drain, such as this dam, which it should have, which is a requirement. So they decided, we will allow the emergency spillway to actuate. The emergency spillway has never actuated in the history of this dam before it did. We all know what happened when it did. During the evolution of this, of course, we were told not to worry. The emergency spillway is founded on solid bedrock and is very sound. And some water will run over for a while and everything will be fine. So here's the disparity of the truths. It's unimportant, really, but that's just the difference between what I say and what others say. Next slide, please. When a dam has an issue, and when unresolved that issue will cause a failure of the dam, that evolution is called a failure mode. Typically, in a dam failure, something will break, and it will not be able to be repaired. Often, these things happen in times of great storm, of course. And this thing evolves and evolves until it becomes out of control and you have a dam failure. Well, like Oroville in every way, Oroville doesn't seem to, the dam seems to do nothing on a small scale. Everything's big scale. Oroville has a number of failure modes operating simultaneously. First of all, there's the main spillway. Having eroded away half of the spillway, with it effectively gone, non-usable, having eroded away the bedrock 60 feet deep beneath that section of the spillway where it failed, they moved to the emergency spillway. The emergency spillway is about a 30-foot high, massive concrete OG weir. That's the shape. Looks like half of a bell in cross-section. That OG weir was to actuate. The slope downstream should have been a grassed slope. Instead, it had vegetation and trees on it. FERC requires that there be no vegetation other than grass on the downstream slope of an emergency spillway on any dam that they regulate. But as far back as I can find photographs, there have been trees growing in this emergency spillway. The tallest dam in the United States. One of the 10 largest dams in the world. So the same people who would put you in jail for not maintaining your farm pond didn't bother to cut the trees in the emergency spillway until 2 days before the emergency spillway actuated. And then they raced around like fools with a bunch of equipment, tearing up the soil such as it was in the emergency spillway, pushing the trees away. The next issue that as soon as I saw this thing happening, long before the emergency spillway actually actuated, I said there are three failure modes here: the primary spillway, the emergency spillway, and an embankment scour of the stilling pool. What happens with this is when an emergency spillway actuates, particularly one that erodes a lot, then the stilling pool, which in your case is the Feather River, becomes choked with debris. Well, indeed it did, didn't it? This is the main spillway, which we already talked. Oh, do go back to that if you would. That is within a portion of the emergency spillway. The level of the water, as we saw happen, then begins to rise quite a lot. And it did rise alarmingly. In fact, it rose so much that they could no longer use the power plant because the power plant was becoming underwater as this continued to build up and choked the power plant out. Now, fortunately, at this point, they decided, well, we've got a bad thing and a really bad thing. I prefer the bad thing to the really bad thing. And they reactuated again the controlled spillway of the principal spillway. Thank God, the rains began to cease, and the inflow to the basin began to mitigate. That is the only reason that that dam did not fail. They brought it down so the emergency spillway no longer ran. The evacuation took place because it became obvious within a matter of a few hours that the bedrock was not indeed bedrock. And for all the people who've responded to me saying, well, that's bedrock, I'm looking at that, and that is not bedrock. That is highly weathered, low recovery rock and soil, and that is the entirety of the millions of yards of soils that were washed down into the Feather River. That's a picture of the principal spillway, which everyone has seen a million times and is so very familiar with, eroding away. That gives you a very good idea for what I'm talking about, the choking of that river. Now, if you look back toward the dam on the right here, it's very hard to get a picture of this. Isn't it strange how difficult it is to get pictures of certain things? There are many pictures of certain things, and then there are other things, and there are no pictures of them. How strange. How strange to fire 5 men who work on a job site because they took their cameras out and took a picture. I've been in construction for 45 years. I don't know how many men I've had working for me on how many jobs. I never fired a man for taking a picture. It just never even occurred to me. Didn't even think that was a valid thing to do or an honorable thing. But if you look to the right there, looking downstream, you can see that the power plant now